Hey, this video I have a look at my NAS upgrade. So I've been running with a Netgear ReadyNAS 104 for about 8 years. It came out in 2013. It's actually out of support from the manufacturer now. So about half a year ago the power supply on it failed, but I found I could replace it with a Synology power supply. They were pin compatible and it's kept going, but just last couple of weeks I've started to get log errors where it's been doing random shutdowns. Because the whole idea with NAS is they should be kind of trouble free, and you should be able to forget about them running. I think it's time to get a new NAS, so I'm going to upgrade to a Synology 920 Plus, and in this video I'll just show you how I set up the Synology, how I got my files and shares from the old NAS onto the new NAS, and some of the new features of the new NAS. So the other reason for upgrading is I want to do things like run a VM on it, so I can have an Ubuntu VM for running ROS2 things always available on the network. So I'll be doing that as well, and there's probably some other great things that Synology has that just weren't around 8 years ago. Okay, just have a look at the setup on my ReadyNAS 104. So this is the one that I'll be replacing. So at the moment I've got about 4.5 terabytes of space, so 1.5 terabytes used for data and about 3 terabytes free. Set up as RAID 5. It's actually using 4 drives, so it's got a 4 terabyte, a 1 terabyte, a 1 terabyte and a 3 terabyte drive in the machine. I've also set up a file backup to an attached USB disk, and that runs nightly to do a backup of the changes, and then every month it does a full backup of the drive. So on that connected USB drive, this is what does the backup nightly, and this is what I think I'll use to create the new file system on the Synology. Has a lot of folders in it. Some of them are just ones that were on the Seagate portable drive when I got it, but the ones I'm going to be interested in and the ones that I'm using that are backup of content on the NAS is one called Backup, which is backup of all the machines connected to the NAS, Documents, Dropbox, FTP, and this one also has an FTP service over the top of it, so I can access the FTP. Other folders are music, pictures, software and videos. There's a few folders here that I won't be putting onto the new Synology just because they're ones I created at one time but end up not using, and like I said, some of them are just folders from when the actual Seagate drive arrived. So my plan for setting up the new Synology drive will be, initially I'll just put a 4 terabyte drive into the Synology just as a single non-RAID setup, and I'll copy from the Seagate portable drive all the files onto the Synology. I want to keep the ReadyNAS running as long as possible before I decommission it. Once that's successfully copied over, then I'll set up the shares on the Synology. I think at that point I'm going to change the IP addresses, so the Synology becomes the IP address I was using for the original NAS, and just change the NAS's address to something else. I'll make sure all the shares and everything are working from my attached PCs to the Synology, and then at that point I can decommission the ReadyNAS 104. I'm going to take out the other 4 terabyte and the 3 terabyte drives from that, so 2 other drives, put them into the Synology, and tell the Synology to run using SHD RAID system. It should automatically balance between, in the end, 3 drives, so a 4 and a 3 terabyte, which should give me a usable space of 7 terabytes on the Synology. I'll check everything's working, get the backups working on the Synology. At that point I'll feel happy about decommissioning the ReadyNAS box. I'll take it off the network, and then I'll have a look at some of the extra things you can do with the Synology. So a couple of things I want to do is put a Ubuntu 20.4 virtual machine on there, so I can run ROS activities on there. I'm going to have a look at the VPN software. At the moment I'm using some other VPN softwares, but it'd be nice to have it on the NAS. And the other thing I might run on there is the Plex server. So I've got a lot of photos and CDs I've ripped, so having Plex on there will be useful. So let's try that and see how it works out. So I've connected to my NAS. I've downloaded and installed Synology's DSM software. That's what we see here. I've connected to the NAS, and I've actually updated the IP address as well. I've given it a static one of 110 at the moment. First thing I need to do, so I had a 4 terabyte drive in Drive Bay 1, and I needed to set it up as a storage pool. So I selected it and set it up as a storage pool. This actually took about 12 hours to go through and initialize the drive. But now it's set up, it's healthy, so I want to create a volume. So my volume's created, so I should be able to start making shares and bring data over from the last backup from my ReadyNAS drive. So I'm going to go to Control Panel, go to Shared Folders, create one on volume 1, and the first one I'll try is music. And now I have my music folder, and I have my share for my USB drive that's plugged in. So let's try copying music over and see how it goes. I jumped forward to how I finally set it all up. So just have a look at this diagram. We'll show you what I finally used the Synology for and how I set it up, and then I'll have a quick dive into some of these modules and packages to see how they're used in a little bit more detail. But the actual installation instructions, I'll put a lot of links in the YouTube description down below to other YouTubes that I use to understand how to set up some of these specific packages out here. So this diagram represents the home network, the interface I have to the internet from my home network via a firewall, and then the offline backup that I'm using just a Seagate disk to plug in and get offline backups. One of the things I wanted to make sure of is that with all the ransomware happening at the moment, that I had a good way of partitioning data that the home network and any ransomware attack would have access to, and even if there is a ransomware attack on my home network, everything gets encrypted, that there'd be backups out here that weren't accessible from the home network. And I think I've done that. So the main thing was to separate the groups of users. So I'm just using the administrators group and the users group that's in Synology to separate the two. The administrators have more privileges than users. Really, I tried to keep the users just to have access to the SMB shares on the disk, but no access to the actual management of the Synology. And then the administrators have access to managing all these packages that I'm I installed, as well as they'd be the only ones with visibility to this USB backup disk out here. So backups can happen under the administrator's user group privileges without users being able to see what's happening or seeing all the data. So as long as I can get a good version to backup of my Synology, then I should be able to restore anything that might get encrypted. Some of the other things I did here, so like I said, users have access to the shares on the Synology via SMB, so just normal network sharing for the home network. One of the packages I set up was to use the Synology VM manager to set up an Ubuntu 20.4 instance. I did it as a server instance because I really only needed the command line interface to it, and also set up an X Windows service on that Ubuntu so that people could SSH in and then bring up X Windows Windows on their PCs when they connect to Ubuntu. Found for photo sharing that the Moments package that came with Synology was really good. It has AI built into it to categorize all my photos, so something that's been long overdue. So now all my photos are now under management by Moments, and I'll give you a little view of what that looks like. Also, what I installed on here was OpenVPN. So that's VPN's software, and it replaces what I was using before, Wireguard, that was running on a Raspberry Pi. So now from the internet, I have a port open in my firewall forwarded to OpenVPN so that valid users can get in and then have access to my local network. So really used for if I'm traveling to be able to connect into my home network. And the only other port now I have open on my firewall access from the internet is an FTP share. And that's managed through a unique user, FTP user, which is the only user that has access via this FTP service to the FTP share on the folders. So one good thing, at least on my home network, I've been able to cut down a lot of ports I had open on my firewall and access to the internet. So really I've only got these two open now, so I can concentrate on securing those and not have to worry about others that might be out there. Other packages I put on here was Active Backup. So this is a client backup utility, so it's really easy to set up. Again, I've got linked to a good demo of setting it up in my links down below, but basically allows backups of the PCs and any devices I have out on my network, which can be scheduled, so I can I've set them up to be just daily backups of the contents of 4 PCs I have, and those are versioned as well, so you can keep versions and long-term backups. So again, in case of a ransomware attack, I can restore data from days ago, months ago, years ago. Should all be available to me. And Active Backup seems a nice package. It does compression and then dedupes files, so if a file's already been backed up or even from another machine, then it doesn't take another copy of that file, so it saves a lot of disk space that way as well. So that's all on my shares as well. And then the other package I'm using is this Hyper Backup. Again, just a standard Synology utility, and that's the thing that's taking the backup of my volume with all the shares on it, so all the contents of this Synology. It's backing it up to via a USB connection to a Seagate 4 gig drive, and periodically I'll cycle those around as well, so that I have 2 physical copies as USB backup disks as well. That is also supports for versioning, so again, if it takes a copy of the latest version of a file that may have become encrypted, I can go back to older versions from that backup as well, so it should be well protected there. And again, because only administrators group has access and is running this Hyper Backup and has visibility to this drive, it should be safe for anyone that any virus or any ransomware attack that gets onto these machines, it just won't have access or be able to see it through SMB. And then the other thing here represented is just on the Ubuntu VM. I set up SSH, so that's probably going to be the normal way these home network PCs normally access Ubuntu, is through SSH or through the Access Windows interface. So let's have a little bit more detailed look at some of these packages, and also look at some of the hiccups I ran into when I was moving my data over from the NAS 104. So when I was setting up the hard drives, or bring the hard drives over from the ReadyNAS, I kind of made a mistake in the order I did it. So in the end, I couldn't install my 3 terabyte drive. So you can see here I've installed the 2 4 terabyte drives in the storage manager and added them to the volume. That went successfully. So Synology automatically knows if there's 2 drives of the same size to switch over to RAID 1, or what it looks like RAID 1 under Synology Hybrid RAID. So I get the benefits of everything being duplicated across the 2 drives with that. But then I thought I'd be able to add the 3 terabyte drive and have it running kind of in a RAID 5 mode instead of under this SHR. But Synology doesn't allow that. Any drives you add after the first 2 needs to be at least the size of the needs to be the size of the largest drive in that RAID array so far. So the 3 terabyte couldn't be added successfully, which is probably a good thing. I only really need I'm only using about 1.5 terabytes of drive space at the moment, so this is plenty, having the 2 4 terabyte drives in there. And if I want to extend later on, it just means I need to get 4 terabyte drives or larger anyway, which is probably better use for the extra drive bays available in the Synology Drive anyway. So that's kind of what's happening, but I've got to work out what I'm going to do with the spare 3 terabyte drive now. So next I wanted a way of organizing my photos better than I've been doing on the ReadyNAS, which was just a file share with a whole bunch of photos in it. So they have a package called Moments, which has got some AI in it. So it does kind of the Google Photos thing of going through and being able to identify people and places and subject matter of the photos. So it's kind of neat. I could put all my photos in there, let it burble away. It actually took a couple of days to process all the photos I had there, but it ended up putting them in much better categories of people and subjects. So for example, you can click in here and you see the photos broken down by kind of the subject area of those photos, and I didn't need to do anything to do that. So that's great. One change it made was where before I had a share called Photos or Pictures, I now had all those things under a folder called Moments. It's just the way Moments runs, is you've got to have it under a folder called Moments, or the folder called Moments. That may change in later versions of DSM, but at the moment I'm using DSM 6, which requires you just put your photos in a specific place, but the result is this great categorization of all the photos. So I'm happy with that. Next package I took advantage of was one called Active Backup for Business. So this allows you to manage backups from PCs that you have on your local network. So I've actually got 4 spread around the house. I got 2 desktops and 2 laptop PCs. So I wanted to be able to do daily backups of anything that changed on those and keep versions of the files for days, weeks, months, years, so I could never lose them. And this was perfect, or 99% perfect. So I set up my 4 PCs. You add a agent to the PCs, which is very easy to do. You just sign into this and from the PC, and it downloads a piece of software that runs as the agent. You can set up schedules for when you want to back things up. The only tricky thing I found was it didn't seem to back up from PCs that had gone to sleep, so I had the backups happening in the middle of the night in most cases when the PCs had actually gone to sleep. So my solution for that was really just to set up a scheduled jobs on the actual PCs to wake them up just before the backups are due to start, and I think that should work. So they'll give me the daily backups that I need. But otherwise, this is like a full featured package. Again, it's free with Synology, and does just about every complicated thing you'd want to do with backups. But I found it really easy to use as well. Didn't have to learn a lot to learn how to do it, and later on I can use it for backing up other things like file servers in my virtual machine as well. I haven't started on those backups. The other nice thing about it is it automatically compresses and dedupes files that are copied up. So if you've already copied up a file, then it doesn't create a new version of that file for another machine or another time. It just references that earlier copy, so that's nice. So it keeps the space used on the Synology down. So I'm only using just over 700 gig for backups over 3 days at the moment for those 4 machines. So another package I'm using is the VPNServer. So I'm using the OpenVPN protocol for that. Again, it was really easy to set up. It's just a standard Synology package. I installed it, set it up. It seemed to work without any real issues. I could install OpenVPN clients on my PC and on my iPads, which is the only things that I'll probably use for remote access to my network. It's been working well, and it replaces Wireguard that I had on my network before. So I also installed a virtual machine. So I used the virtual machine manager where you can set up the parameters for your virtual machine. So you see here I set up a virtual machine for my Ubuntu server 20.4. I'm using that for doing my ROS robotics work. I only need a command line interface, so I really just set up the server version of Ubuntu, and by doing that I think I can reduce the resource requirements. But again, you can set up in this virtual machine manager, how much memory you're going to allocate to it. So I've allocated 1 gig because I've only got 4 gig on the Synology, but leaves plenty of space for other applications to run. And I gave it 50 gig of CPU, and I allocated just 1 CPU to it. Again, I'm not doing anything really complicated with Ubuntu, not running databases or anything like that. I'm just running ROS, or using it for running ROS. So I have it so it always starts up when the Synology starts up, and then just keeps running. And I made it open an SSH port so that any of my home PCs could connect to it through SSH, and installed X Windows on it so I could run X Windows utilities. That's something else that you need for some of the ROS work. Okay, the final main package I took advantage of is one called Hyper Backup, this one here, and that's the one that will copy contents of your Synology disk up to an attached storage device. It can do more things too. It can copy to other NASs, all sorts of things, but that's the use I made of it, was to get my offline backups up to my Seagate connected USB drive. It's got a lot of parameters, so you can copy the whole disk, parts of the disk. I just copy the whole thing. Also, it's got a scheduler in it. I've scheduled it to run daily, and it'll do incremental backups as well. So it'll keep track of changes and add that to the backup as time goes on, and does all the normal thing of deduping the backup as well. So if file's already been backed up in the past, it doesn't copy it again, or if it hasn't changed, it won't copy it again. But this is the main thing I'm going to use as the resource for making sure if I have a ransomware attack on my home network that I can recover all the files. And even for normal disaster recovery things, I'll have a way of recovering all the files, and then also be able to keep this offline USB device. I can swap it out time to time, so I can have multiple ones and maybe save them in a safe location. So it should just about cover all the bad things that could happen to my files. And about the only other package, I won't go into it, but I also put Plex on. I'm not sure whether I'm going to use that long term or not. Hey, so I'm pretty happy with the change of my NAS over from the ReadyNAS, which is pretty old, to Synology. So with the larger processor and the Synology, a 4-core Celeron, I think, a lot more memory, a lot more capability to run packages. I sort of get what I had before, which was the ability to have shares on the network. But the nice new thing is all these packages, and as you saw, I could change my VPN out so that it was running on the one box. I could do much better backups for my local PCs. Can play with things like Plex. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be using that long term. It may be too much work to rip all my DVDs. But very happy with it. I just kind of feel now like I've sort of got a data center in the box, and I've cleared up some of the spare Raspberry Pis and things I had hanging around. So I think it's well worthwhile, and I'm happy with the upgrade.